We should be safe here for now, Professor Du said, checking the screens that showed different parts of the station. But we need a plan. Before they could discuss further, one of the screens flashed red. It showed Hyun and Sun talking to security guards and pointing at a map. Your classmates, Professor Du said grimly to Ta. They're helping security find us. Tae's silver face darkened. Hyun and Sun would do anything to look good to the council. They probably think they'll be rewarded. Jia watched the screen, feeling strangely calm. The knowledge flowing through her mind was becoming easier to access. She now understood the layout of the entire station, though she had never seen a map of it. There are 3 security teams closing in, she said, pointing to different screens. They'll reach us in about 10 minutes. Professor Du looked at her with surprise. How do you know that? I just do, Jia said. She turned to a wall that looked solid. And I know there's another exit behind that panel. She pressed her hand against the wall in a specific pattern. A hidden door slid open, revealing another tunnel. The Harbinger memories, Professor Du whispered. They're giving you knowledge of this station. It must have existed during their time. They gathered what they could and moved into the new tunnel. As they walked, Jia felt her senses becoming sharper. She could hear distant footsteps and voices. She could see clearly despite the dim light. There are others like me, aren't there? Jia. Alarms blared throughout the station. On the screens, Jia could see security forces searching every level. They'd found our location, Ki said, checking the sensors. We have less than 30 minutes before they reach us. The truth seekers moved quickly, gathering their most important data and equipment. Everyone looked to Jia, waiting for her to tell them what to do. The Harbinger memories were now fully awake in her mind. She knew how to fight, how to lead, how to win a war against impossible odds. These skills were tempting. With them, she could easily defeat the guards, maybe even take control of the station. But something held her back. The same wisdom that had led the ancient humans to hide their power in the first place. I won't fight them, Jia announced. Everyone stopped to stare at her. But you can, Ta said, confused. I saw what you did to those guards. Just because I can doesn't mean I should, Jia replied. She looked at Professor Du. The ancient humans didn't hide because they were afraid. They hid because they understood that power can corrupt even the best intentions. Professor Du nodded slowly. What do you suggest we do then? Jia walked to the main computer. The truth seekers have been collecting hidden history for years, right? Let's share it with everyone. The council will try to stop us, Ki warned. They can try, Jia said. Her fingers moved across the controls with perfect skill, accessing systems she had never seen before. But they can't stop what they can't find. On the screens, data began to flow to every communication device on the station. The true history of humans, the coming threat of the void, and the council's deception, all of it broadcast to thousands of people at once. They'll track the signal, Ta said. Not this one, Jia replied, her hands still moving. This is Harbinger technology. It's been dormant in the station's systems for 3,000 years, waiting for the right genetic key to activate it. As they worked, they could hear Commander Jin and his forces getting closer. Heavy boots echoed in the tunnels outside. What about the void? Ki asked. Even if everyone knows the truth, how do we stop something that scared even the Harbingers? Jia stood up straight, feeling the weight of both her identities, the human girl who had been mocked for being primitive, and the ancient warrior whose power had once shaped the galaxy. Not through fear, she said. Not through secrets and control. That's what the council tried. That's not the human way. Not the true human way. The doors burst open. Commander Jin entered with dozens of armed guards. But behind them came hundreds of students and teachers, all watching their screens, all seeing the truth for the first time. Arrest them all, Commander Jin ordered, but none of the guards moved. They were watching their screens too. Jia stepped forward. The void is coming, she said, her voice strong and clear. Not just for humans, but for all life in the galaxy. The ancient humans didn't hide their power because they were weak. They hid it because they understood that true strength comes from unity, not domination. Commander Jin's weapon wavered. The council ordered. The council lied. Jia interrupted. They'd been lying for 3,000 years. They kept humans ignorant of their past. They kept everyone else afraid of what humans might become. All around the room, people were putting down their weapons. Even Hyun and Sun pushed through the crowd, their faces showing shame and wonder. We need to stand together, Jia continued. Humans have the memories, the knowledge to fight the void. But we need all species, all minds working together to win. She turned to face everyone in the room. Friends, enemies, and those in between. My ancestors could have ruled the galaxy. Instead, they chose to protect it. They believed all species deserved freedom and life. I make the same choice today. One by one, people from every species stepped forward to stand with her. Tide was first, then Ki and his truth seekers. Even Commander Jin finally lowered his weapon. As Jia looked at them all, she felt a sense of rightness that came from both sides of herself. The human girl who had been mocked for her species, and the harbinger who had once commanded fleets. The galaxy would face the void together. And this time, they would not forget what they had learned. This time, they would remember that the most unlikely allies could be the strongest. And that humans, ordinary, overlooked humans, had once saved the stars themselves. Today we will visit the Academy Museum, Professor Du announced. They have special items from the Dark Millennium on display. The class lined up at the transport pad. Jia stood at the back, trying not to draw attention. The dreams had come every night now, each one more real than the last. She hardly felt like herself anymore. Kai stood beside her. Are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine, Jia lied. She hadn't told anyone about the dreams, not even Kai. The museum was enormous, with high ceilings and walls made of a clear material stronger than steel. The tour guide, a tall alien with glowing spots on her skin, led them through halls filled with artifacts from across the galaxy. Now we come to the Dark Millennium section, the guide said. Most items were destroyed during this time, but we have recovered a few. Jia walked with the group, but something pulled at her attention. A door at the end of the hall. It was plain and gray, with a small sign that read, Restricted Access. Without thinking, Jia moved toward it. Jia, where are you going? Ki whispered, but Jia didn't answer. She stopped in front of the door. There was a security panel beside it with alien writing. Somehow, Jia knew what the symbols meant. She reached out and touched the panel. The door slid open. Jia stepped inside, drawn by a force she couldn't explain. The room was dark except for a soft blue light in the center. As her eyes adjusted, she saw what the light was coming from. A suit of armor floating in a clear case. The armor was unlike anything Jia had ever seen. It seemed to shift and move, even though it was perfectly still. It was black with lines of blue light running through it like veins. It looked both ancient and more advanced than any technology she had seen at the Academy. Jia moved closer. The armor seemed to pulse, as if alive. What are you doing in here? Tay's voice came from behind her. He had followed her into the room. This area is off limits to students. Jia didn't turn around. I needed to see this. How did you open the door? It requires high-level clearance. I don't know, Jia said honestly. I just touched the panel. Ta moved beside her, looking at the armor. What is this thing? It's a harbinger suit, Jia said, the words coming to her from somewhere deep in her mind. It enhances the wearer's natural abilities and connects them to a network of similar suits. How do you know that? Tai asked, his voice a mix of awe and fear. Before Jia could answer, the case containing the armor lit up. Symbols appeared in the air above it, glowing blue data that scrolled too fast to read. It's scanning us, Jia whispered. The data stopped scrolling and focused on a single symbol. It pulsed 3 times, then expanded into a complex string of code. I can't read this, Ta said, squinting at the symbols. But Jia could. It's a genetic profile, she said. It's showing DNA patterns. She pointed to one section of the code. This part looks familiar. The data shifted again, and a new set of symbols appeared. Beside them was an image that made Jia's heart stop. It was Earth. S1. Tad read from the display. Subject 1. He turned to Jia, his silver face reflecting the blue light. S1 is Earth. Humans are S1. The door slid open, flooding the room with light. Professor Du stood in the doorway, his 3 eyes fixed on Jia. I see it has found you, he said quietly. What has found me? Jia asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Your heritage, Professor Du said. The truth about who you are, who all humans are. He looked at the armor, then back at Jia. The Harbingers have awakened again. And you, Jia, carry their blood. Ta backed away from Jia. That's impossible. Humans are primitive. They only just learned to travel between stars. That, Professor Du said, is what we wanted everyone to believe. The truth is far more complicated. He gestured to Jia. And far more dangerous. We need to go now, he said, taking charge. More guards will come soon. Jia stood still, looking at her hands. They had moved so fast, with such perfect skill. It scared her how easy it had been to defeat the guards. Professor Du tied up Commander Jin while Qi and the other students helped move the unconscious guards into a side room. Where can we go? Tai asked. The whole station will be looking for us. I know a place, Qi said. An old abandoned station section. My group uses it to meet in secret. They moved quickly through the tunnels, following Kai. Jia walked next to Tai, who kept glancing at her with a mix of awe and concern. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I'm not sure, Jia answered honestly. It feels like there are 2 people in my head now. Me and someone else. Someone very old and powerful. You saved us back there, Ta said. Whatever is happening to you, it seems to be helping. After walking for what felt like hours, they reached an old airlock. Beyond it was a large circular room filled with old technology and maps on the walls. About 20 students from different species were already there, working at computers or talking in small groups. Welcome to our base, Qi said. We call ourselves the Truth Seekers. We've been collecting hidden history for years. You never told me about any of this, Jia said, feeling a little hurt. Kai's fur rippled, a sign of regret among his people. I wanted to, but we had to be sure you were ready. When your genetic memories started to wake up, I knew it was time. An older student approached them. Is this the human you told us about? She asked Kai. Yes, this is Jia. The memories are strong in her. The older student nodded. Good. We need to show her. They led Jia to a large computer in the center of the room. On the screen was a map of the galaxy with thousands of tiny lights. Each light is a beacon, Qi explained. The ancient humans left them scattered across the galaxy. They'd been dormant for 3,000 years, but 6 months ago, they all activated at once. Why? Jia asked. They detect threats, Professor Du said, joining them. The kind of threats only Harbingers could face. Kai pointed to the edge of the galaxy map. Something is coming from beyond the outer rim. Something that even the ancient humans feared. Jia felt cold. The Harbinger memories stirred in her mind, bringing flashes of a terrible battle among the stars. They were called the Void, she said, the words coming from deep within her. They don't conquer. They consume. They absorb all life, all knowledge. Everyone stared at her. The Harbingers fought them before, Jia continued, drawing on the memories. They pushed the Void back, but at a great cost. Half the Harbinger fleet was destroyed. This is why humans hid their power, Professor Du said. They knew the Void would return someday. They needed a secret weapon, something the enemy wouldn't expect. What weapon? Tai asked. Us, Jia said simply. Humans who looked primitive, but carried the memories of the greatest warriors who ever lived. The void would see a weak species, not a threat, until it was too late. Kai brought up another image on the screen. It showed a strange, dark shape moving between stars. Our long-range sensors detected this 3 days ago, he said. It's still far away, but it's heading toward populated systems. The Council knows about this, Professor Du added. That's why they're so desperate to find awakening humans. Some Council members want to use humans as weapons against the void. Others want to hide the truth and save themselves. Jia looked at the dark shape on the screen. The Harbinger memories filled her with dread, but also with determination. The ancient humans created a defense system, she said. They called it the contingency. It's not just memories, it's a network. When enough humans remember, we can access the old technology, the hidden ships. And you're the key, Key said. Your genetic pattern matches the commander of the Harbinger fleet, the one who led the first battle against the void. Jia felt the weight of this truth settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was the heir to humanity's greatest power and its greatest responsibility. And the enemy that had made her ancestors hide was coming back. For your next big project, Professor Du announced to the class, you will work in pairs to study one of the lost civilizations from the Dark Millennium. Jia sat up straight in her seat. This was her chance to prove herself. She glanced at Kia, hoping they could work together. I have already chosen your partners, Professor Du continued, crushing Jia's hope. He began reading names from his datapad. Hyun and Sun, Ki and Ray. He paused before saying, Jia and Tai. Jia's heart sank. Tai, the student who hated her the most, would be her partner. Across the room, Ta's silver face darkened with anger. Professor, Ta called out. I don't think. My decision is final, Professor Du said firmly. Sometimes the best discoveries come from unlikely partnerships. After class, Jia tried to talk to Tai about their project, but he walked away quickly. Ki gave her a sympathetic look. He'll have to work with you eventually, Ki said. The project is worth half our grade. The next day, Tai was waiting for Jia outside the academy library. His silver face showed no emotion. Let's get this over with, he said. I want to study the Centauri Empire. They were the most powerful before they disappeared. Okay, Jia agreed, relieved he was at least willing to work with her. The library was massive, with rows of data crystals and actual paper books from thousands of worlds. They found a quiet corner with a viewing station and began their research. Hours passed as they read about the Centauri Empire. They had been masters of energy technology, ruling over 40 star systems. Then, suddenly, 3,000 years ago, they'd vanished. All 40 worlds were found empty, with no signs of war or disease. This is strange, Jia said, pointing to a section of text. It says before they disappeared, they were in conflict with something called S1. But there's no information about what S1 was. Tai leaned closer to read. That section is redacted in the official records. Interesting. They dug deeper, searching for more information. Tai used his academy clearance to access older files. Look at this, he said, showing Jia a document. The Arcturian collective also fought with S1 before they disappeared. So did the Rigel dynasty. Jia felt a chill. All three civilizations disappeared within 10 years of each other, and all three fought with this same unknown enemy. As they continued searching, they found more references to something called the Harbinger. It appeared in records from multiple civilizations, always right before they vanished. The Harbinger comes when empires grow too cruel. Tai read from an ancient poem. When worlds cry out for justice, the Harbinger answers. It sounds like some kind of avenging force, Jia said quietly. Tai looked at her with narrowed eyes. Or a weapon. Maybe S1 created the Harbinger to destroy their enemies. They worked until the library announced it was closing. As they packed up their notes, Tai seemed deep in thought. "You know," he said finally, "you're not as stupid as the other humans I've met." Jia wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but it was better than being called primitive. That night, Jia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the Harbinger and the lost civilizations. When she finally drifted off, she had strange dreams. In her dream, she stood on the bridge of a massive ship. Through the viewport, she saw a planet with 3 moons. Somehow, she knew it was the Centauri homeworld. Her hands, which didn't look like her hands, moved over control panels. A voice spoke behind her. "The Empire refused our final warning. Harbinger, they continue to enslave innocent worlds." In the dream, Jia's mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was older, colder. "Then they have made their choice," dreamed Jia said. "Prepare the fleet." Jia woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. The dream had felt so real, like a memory rather than imagination. She tried to go back to sleep, but one thought kept her awake. In her dream, she had been the Harbinger. Professor Du led Jia and Tai down a hidden hallway beneath the museum. The walls were old and made of real stone, not the shiny metal used in most of the station. Their footsteps echoed as they walked. "We don't have much time," Professor Du said. "Security will notice the open door soon." "What's happening?" Jia asked. Her heart was beating fast. "What did you mean about my heritage?" They entered a small room filled with old books and strange devices. Professor Du sealed the door behind them and turned to face Jia. "What do they teach humans about their history?" he asked. Jia thought about her classes on Earth. "That we developed slowly. We only achieved space travel 200 years ago, when the Arcturians found us." Professor Du's 3 eyes blinked one after another. "That is the official story. The truth is very different." He picked up an old metal cube from his desk. 3,000 years ago, humans were not primitive. They were the most advanced species in the galaxy. Tai made a sound of disbelief. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Professor Du asked. He activated the cube, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a massive fleet of ships unlike any Jia had seen before. This was the human fleet. They called themselves the Sovereign. They had technology that we still don't understand today. Jia stared at the ships. They looked like the one from her dreams. The humans were powerful, Professor Du continued, but they were not cruel. They only used their power when needed. When the Centauri Empire began enslaving other species, humans stepped in. When the Rigel dynasty created weapons that could destroy entire stars, humans stopped them. "The Harbingers," Jia whispered. "Yes, the Harbingers were elite human soldiers. They wore suits like the one you saw, which enhanced their natural abilities. They could defeat entire armies alone." The hologram changed to show a person in the black armor with blue lines, just like in the museum. "But if humans were so powerful," Tai asked, "what happened to them? Why are they seen as primitive now?" Professor Du looked sad. "That is the great mystery. After defeating several dangerous empires, humans did something unexpected. They returned to Earth and erased their own technology and memories. They chose to start over." "Why would they do that?" Jia asked. "Some say they feared becoming like the empires they fought. Others believe it was to hide from an enemy even they couldn't defeat. We don't know for sure." Professor Du turned to Jia. "What we do know is that they left something behind. A safety measure. They encoded the memories of their greatest warriors into their DNA, to be passed down through generations. These memories would remain dormant until needed." "The dreams," Jia said, finally understanding. "I'm having someone else's memories." "Yes, you carry the genetic memory of a Harbinger commander, one of the most powerful humans who ever lived." Ta looked at Jia with new eyes, not with fear or hate, but with wonder. "The Galactic Council has kept this secret for centuries," Professor Du said. "They fear what would happen if humans remembered their past. They have been watching human students closely, looking for signs of genetic memory awakening. Like me, Jia said. Yes, and you are not the first. Others have shown signs before. Some were taken away for special training. They never returned to their families. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the room. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside. They've discovered the open vault, Professor Du said urgently. We need to move. He handed Jia a small device. This contains the truth about your people. Keep it safe. What do we do now? Tai asked, looking nervous. Now, Professor Du said, opening a hidden door in the wall. You run. Jia clutched the device in her hand, feeling its weight. All her life, she had been mocked for being human, for being primitive. But now she knew the truth. Humans hadn't always been weak. They had once been powerful enough to shake the galaxy. And somewhere inside her, that power was waking up. Jia couldn't focus in class the next day. The dream stayed with her, clear and vivid in her mind. It didn't fade like normal dreams do. Instead, it felt like a memory she had just remembered. During lunch, she sat alone as usual. But today, she didn't notice the stares or whispers from other students. Her mind was still on the ship from her dream, the controls under her fingers, and the cold voice that had come from her mouth. You look tired, Qi said, sitting beside her. His gray fur looked extra fluffy today, which usually meant he was worried. I didn't sleep well, Jia admitted. She wanted to tell him about the dream, but something held her back. How's the project with Ta going? Qi asked. Before Jia could answer, Tai appeared at their table. Both Jia and Qi looked up in surprise. Ta never approached them during lunch. I found something, Ta said quietly, sitting down. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. About S1. He showed them his datapad. On it was an old star chart with several systems marked in red. These are the home systems of species that were just starting to explore space around the time of the Dark Millennium, Tai explained. One of them is labeled S1, but the name is redacted. Jia leaned closer, feeling strangely drawn to one particular star. What's that one? It's a yellow star with 9 planets, Ta said. The third planet had life. K's eyes widened. That sounds like. It can't be, Ta cut him off. Humans were primitive 3,000 years ago. They were still using stone tools. That's what our history books say, Qi said softly. But my people have stories about the stars that aren't in any books. Stories about the shadow walkers who reshaped the sky. Tai seemed interested now. What kind of stories? Kai looked uncomfortable. Just old tales. They say that long ago, there were beings who could walk between stars as easily as we walk across a room. They brought justice to the cruel and mercy to the kind. Like the Harbinger, Jia whispered. That night, the dream came again. But this time, it was different. Jia stood on a planet's surface. The sky was green, and 3 suns hung low on the horizon. Before her knelt a group of aliens with scaled skin and 6 limbs each. They wore ornate armor that was now damaged and dirty. Please, one of them begged in a language Jia somehow understood. We surrender. Spare our people. Dream Jia walked forward. Again, her body didn't feel like her own. It was taller, stronger. She felt power coursing through her, not just physical strength, but something deeper. Your empire enslaved 12 species, Dream Jia said in that cold voice. You harvested living beings for parts. You did not show mercy, so why should you receive it? The alien leader bowed lower. We were wrong. Please, Harbinger, we will make amends. Dream Jia raised her hand, and the alien flinched. But instead of striking, she placed her palm on his head. Your empire ends today, she said, but your people may live, scattered, powerless, and watched. If you ever again rise to harm others, we will return, and there will be no second chances. Jia woke with a gasp. Her heart raced, but this time she wasn't afraid. The dream left her feeling strong and purposeful. She got out of bed and went to her small mirror. Her face looked the same, round cheeks, dark eyes, short black hair. But something felt different inside her. Something was waking up. The next day, Jia noticed Ta watching her during class, not with his usual look of disgust, but with curiosity. When Professor Du asked a question about ancient weapons, Jia answered without thinking. The Centauri's most powerful weapon was the Starbreaker, she said. It could crack a planet's core. The room went quiet. Professor Du stared at her with his 3 eyes wide. That's correct, he said slowly, though that information isn't in your textbook. Jia blinked, confused. She didn't know how she knew that. The knowledge had simply been there, like it had always been part of her. Across the room, Ta's silver face showed an emotion Jia had never seen from him before. Fear. Jia and Ta ran through dark tunnels beneath the museum. The alarm still rang above them. Red emergency lights flashed, making shadows dance on the walls. This way, Professor Du called, moving faster than Jia thought possible for someone so old. These tunnels were built by the first academy teachers. They connect to the old station below us. Jia's mind raced as she ran. Everything she knew about herself, about humans, was wrong. The device Professor Du had given her felt heavy in her pocket. Why are you helping us? Ta asked Professor Du between breaths. You're Arcturian. Your people control the council. Not all Arcturians agree with the council, Professor Du said. Some of us believe humans deserve to know their history. My family has worked for generations to keep the truth alive. They reached a round door that looked very old. Professor Du pressed his hand against it, and it slowly opened with a hiss of air. This room is safe, he said as they entered. It blocks signals. They cannot track us here. The room was small but filled with old technology. Screens covered one wall, showing different parts of the station. In the center was a table with a device that looked like the one from Jia's dreams. Sit, Professor Du told Jia. We don't have much time. You need to understand what's happening to you. Jia sat at the table. Her hands were shaking. The genetic memories are awakening faster than expected, Professor Du said, looking at a scanner he passed over Jia's head. Your dreams, they're becoming clearer, aren't they? Jia nodded. Last night, I remembered a full battle. I knew how to use weapons I've never seen. I spoke languages I've never learned. The Harbinger DNA is strong in you, Professor Du said. Stronger than in any human I studied. Ta stood near the door, watching them. What does this mean? Is she dangerous? Professor Du looked at Jia with his 3 eyes. That depends on what she chooses to do with these memories. Jia took the small device from her pocket. You said this contains the truth. Show me. Professor Du took the device and placed it on the table. It projected a hologram showing Earth, but not as Jia knew it. This Earth was surrounded by massive structures and ships. Humans were not conquerors, Professor Du explained as images flowed through the air. They were protectors. They only stepped in when civilizations became threats to all life. The hologram showed humans in Harbinger armor standing between attacking fleets and defenseless planets. The empires that disappeared during the Dark Millennium were not innocent, Professor Du continued. They were developing weapons that could destroy the galaxy, weapons even worse than the Starbreakers. So the Harbingers stopped them, Jia said, understanding now. That's why those civilizations vanished. Yes, but after defending the galaxy from multiple threats, humans made a choice that no species had ever made before. They decided their power was too great. The hologram showed humans returning to Earth, their great ships being dismantled. Instead of ruling the galaxy, which they could have done easily, they chose to forget, to start again as a simple species on their home planet. They erased their technology and most of their knowledge. Why? Jia asked. Why give up so much power? Because they feared becoming what they fought against, Professor Du said. They left only one thing behind, the genetic memories and certain bloodlines. A safeguard, in case the galaxy ever needed the Harbingers again. Ta, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke. The genetic memories are activating now. Does that mean there's a new threat? Professor Du looked grim. I believe so. Something is coming. Something that has the council terrified. As they talked, Gia felt a strange sensation spreading through her body. Knowledge and skills that weren't hers began to surface in her mind. It wasn't just memories now. It was as if another person was waking up inside her. She looked at her hands. They were still her hands, but she now knew exactly how to use them to take apart any weapon, pilot any ship, speak any language. The harbinger within her was awakening. Jia kept her eyes down as she walked through the shining halls of the Galactic Academy. The bright lights above made the metal floors gleam. She clutched her data pad tight against her chest. Around her, aliens of all shapes and colors moved quickly to their classes. Some had blue skin, others had 4 arms, and a few even floated instead of walked. Being the only human at the academy made Gia stand out. Her simple 2 arms, 2 legs, and soft pink skin seemed plain next to her classmates. She had been at the academy for 3 months now, but it felt much longer. Look who it is, a voice called out. The primitive. Gia's shoulders tensed, but she kept walking. She knew who was speaking without looking. It was Ta, a tall Aldebaran with silver skin that shimmered like water. Behind him were his 2 friends, Hyun and Sun. Hyun had scales and eyes that could see in all directions. Sun came from a heavy gravity world and was short but incredibly strong. I don't understand why they let her kind in here, Hyun said loudly. Humans only discovered space travel 200 years ago. My species was traveling between stars when hers was still figuring out how to make fire. They laughed, making sure Jia could hear them. Maybe she's a pet project, Sun suggested. The teachers feel sorry for her. Jia's face burned, but she kept walking. She had earned her place at the academy by being one of the top students on Earth, but none of that mattered to her classmates. The door to her historical civilizations class slid open. Jia took her usual seat in the back corner. As other students filed in, no one sat next to her. No one except Ki, a quiet Procyon with gentle gray eyes and soft fur covering his face. Don't listen to them, Ki whispered as he sat down. Ta's family lost a trade deal to a human company last year. He's just angry. Jia gave Ki a small smile. Thanks. Professor Du walked into the room, silencing the class. The old Arcturian moved slowly, his 4 thin arms carrying various old books and data crystals. His skin was deep blue, and his 3 eyes blinked at different times as he surveyed the classroom. Today, Professor Du said in his deep voice, we will discuss the mysteries of the Dark Millennium. The room grew quiet. The Dark Millennium was one of the most interesting periods in galactic history. About 3,000 years ago, many powerful civilizations had suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and questions. As you know, Professor Du continued, over 30 advanced civilizations vanished during this time. The cause remains unknown. Jia found herself leaning forward in her seat. This was why she loved history, the mysteries, the stories of the past. For a moment, she forgot about Tai and his friends. But then Professor Du did something unexpected. He looked directly at Jia. Humans are relatively new to our galactic community, he said. But sometimes, the newest eyes see things the rest of us have missed. What do you think happened during the Dark Millennium, Jia? The entire class turned to look at her. Ta snickered from across the room. Jia started, her voice small. Then she remembered why she was here. She straightened her back. I think something, or someone, must have been powerful enough to challenge entire empires. And whatever it was either destroyed or it's still out there, hiding. Professor Du's middle eye widened slightly. An interesting theory. Of course the human thinks it was some big monster, Ta said. Their planet still makes primitive entertainment about space creatures attacking worlds. The class laughed. But Professor Du raised a hand for silence. Many great historians began as storytellers, Todd, he said. And sometimes the truth is stranger than any story we could tell. As class continued, Jia noticed Professor Du watching her with a curious look in his eyes. It wasn't the usual pity or doubt she saw from adults. It was something else. It almost looked like recognition.